Number 1. Jennifer. This happened when I was in middle school. I wasn't really popular or unpopular in school. I had a few friends, not many, but I was also never bullied or picked on. I was just sort of there all the time. There was this strange girl that was in my class that I had never known before middle school, though. She was picked on a lot by a lot of people, but it never seemed to bother her. She was extremely quiet, never even peeping up in class for any reason. I think the teachers eventually just accepted it and never even called on her. Her name was Jennifer, and she was probably what people might have considered to be goth before goth really became a thing. She always wore really dark clothes, had long hair that she always had in her face. Plus she always carried an old metal lunchbox with her wherever she went. I didn't know what kind of lunchbox it was, though, because it was painted black. I had never once seen her open it before. She obviously didn't carry her lunch in it, or any school supplies, because she had all that in her backpack. And although I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to her, I was always curious about what she was carrying in that thing. On Valentine's Day at school, we always had this service where people would deliver cards for other students while in class. It was much different than in elementary school, when you just gave a card to everyone in your class. Normally, only certain people would get these cards, and most people really didn't get any. I guess other than that, people probably shared cards with each other on their own, too. I'd never had a Valentine's card given to me in middle school, but that really didn't bother me. I don't think at those ages that I was really interested in having a girlfriend quite yet. The whole school had lunch at the same time. You would eat in the cafeteria, and then most people then would go outside into the courtyard and hang out or play games. It was a bit cold for me in February, so I didn't like to do that. I would go back to my room and sit in my desk and read. When I got back to the room, I was the only one there. That was pretty usual, and I would have over half an hour to myself before all the other students came back. When I got to my desk, though, I was quite surprised. Jennifer's black lunchbox was sitting on the top of my desk. On top of that was a card. I opened up the card, and it was a standard Valentine's Day card asking me to be her Valentine. It was weird enough that this girl, that I barely knew and never talked to, was asking me to be her Valentine. But it was even stranger that she had left the lunchbox there. The entire time that I had known her, I had never seen her without it. She took it everywhere that she went. She must have really liked me a lot to have left it there for me. I wish I could tell you that this made me feel good, but it really just made me uneasy. I figured that she wanted me to open it. I was curious about it, so I decided to do this. To this day, I wish that I hadn't. It was full of all sorts of really weird and gross stuff. There were what looked like animal bones in it. I couldn't tell at the time, but they could have just been bones left after someone had eaten a chicken, so I'm not assuming that she killed any animals. But even saving old chicken bones was gross and weird. There were clumps of hair in there, too. There were also some pictures of me that looked like they were printed off of a computer, because they were on regular paper. I truly didn't know what to make of it. I stood there for a few moments just looking into the lunchbox. Finally, I just closed it back up again. I took it and I placed it back on Jennifer's desk, but I did keep the Valentine's Day card. Later, Jennifer came back to class, along with the rest of the class. I thanked her for the card and she smiled a bit, but she had to have noticed that I put the lunchbox back on her desk. I didn't mention it to her that I had opened it, and I chose not to tell the teacher or anyone else in the school either. I don't really know to this day what to make of the whole thing. Did she know I'd opened the box or no? Did she mean to leave it on my desk, or was it a mistake? Why did she have all that weird stuff in it? I always figured that maybe she didn't know I had opened it. We never became friends or anything, as her family moved away before the end of the school year. But that is something I will never forget, being the weirdest Valentine's Day of my life. Number 2. City. I remember when I first moved into the city. I was 18 years old, and I skipped going to college. I wanted to go straight to the city and work and pursue an acting career. In retrospect, that didn't work out so great, but I did have a lot of really interesting times when I lived in the city. I rented an efficiency apartment on the 10th floor of a building in Rogers Park, Chicago. It wasn't the best building, and I didn't feel completely safe there, but I did have a space all to myself, not having to share it with a roommate. I quickly became acclimated to my life in the city. I arrived in the late fall, so I was able to get used to living there in the winter months, but I didn't really get to know many people right away. This was before everyone was meeting everyone else on the internet, and I was too young to go to clubs and bars, so I was able to meet people by calling phone party lines. This wasn't really the best way to meet people, but it was the only way that I had back then. So, most of the people that I have met were looking mostly for just one thing, and although I didn't really mind that, it wasn't primarily what I wanted. But around the end of the year, I went on a few dates with a girl that I had met using one of those lines. She was very nice, and we had a few nice dates in the beginning. However, it wasn't very long before she began to get a little too obsessive with me. She began to call me all the time. She always wanted to know what I was doing at any time. While I tried to be patient with her in the beginning, it finally became too much for me when she told me that she loved me after only a little bit of time. I know that a lot of younger people like to express this early on in a relationship, but that just made me feel like she wasn't stable. So I let her know that I wasn't planning on seeing her anymore, and at first she seemed to take it just fine. I mean, we weren't in an official relationship. We had just gone on some dates and talked on the phone. So I thought that she would understand. I couldn't have been more wrong, though. She didn't stop calling me. In fact, she began calling me even more. I stopped answering her calls and let the answering machine pick up for me instead. At first, they were just messages with her telling me how much she loved me and telling me to call her back to set up a time for our next date. She didn't even seem put off at first that I wasn't returning her calls. But after a while, her calls began to get pretty erratic, and I wasn't sure what to do. I had been quite clear that I didn't want to see her anymore, and I expected her to understand that. Toward the end of January, though, she began to leave me alone, and I began to think that all of it was finally over. When we got into February, however, I began having experiences that made me believe she was trying to get involved with my life again. I began getting phone calls where the caller ID was blocked, and weird noises were left on my answering machine. There was no way that I was able to tell if it was her making the strange noises or not, but that is pretty quickly what I came to believe. But other than these strange phone calls, I hadn't had any other experiences with her, so I tried to convince myself that she had gotten the picture and that she was out of my life. When Valentine's Day came around that year, I didn't have anyone to spend the day with, not even a friend. But I went to this folk music cafe that I had been to a couple times since I had moved to the city. I spent a few hours there, pretty late into the night, listening to people playing and singing. It was really nice, but not really romantic. But since I was alone, it didn't bother me. I decided to walk back to the apartment building that I lived in. It wasn't a very long walk, but long enough that it would have given me time to just walk and think for a bit. Not long after I began walking, I noticed someone walking behind me. It was a really big and scary-looking guy. I kept checking back over my shoulder looking at him, but what began to bother me is that he kept following me. Whenever I turned down any street, he would turn with me, and he kept about the exact distance from me the entire time. Those two things, combined with how scary the guy looked, were really concerning. When I got closer to my building, I finally got scared enough that I broke out into a hustle to run to the building. I was fortunate that someone else had opened the door with their key and let me in the building right behind them. I quickly pulled the door shut, and it latched. The scary-looking guy stopped at the door, and he looked in for just a moment. Knowing that he couldn't get in, he turned and walked away. I thanked the other resident for letting me in. When I got back to my room, there were several messages from the girl I had broken up with. They were all threats that she was going to get her older brother to beat the crap out of me, and she was laughing about it. There had to be like 7 unhinged messages mocking me, and it was fairly disturbing, and she told me that she told her brother that I had tried to assault her. Why someone would be so unhinged to do this, but then admit it to me on an answering machine is beyond me. I took the information to the police the next day, and she was visited by the police. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of it. Although the good thing is that I never heard from her again. Number 3. Alone. This really isn't as much a Valentine's Day story as much as it is a story that just happened to take place on Valentine's Day. I mean, I wasn't dating anyone at the time, and I didn't spend the time with anyone. In fact, I had the day off work, and I decided that I would just stay home in my apartment all day. But I have to back up just a little bit before that. I met a guy online, and we dated for about 3 months. So it really wasn't anything serious. Or at least, it wasn't serious in my mind. I mean, I just didn't feel a connection, you know? He was a really nice guy and all, but no romantic feelings ever developed. As we were never officially a couple, I just tried to let us grow apart. I guess maybe that was the immature way of handling it. I should have talked to him on the phone and let him know I wasn't interested anymore. But after not answering his calls a few times, he quit calling me. So I assumed that he had gotten the picture and probably agreed with me. I mean, if he still wanted to go out with me, he would have tried harder to stay more in contact with me, right? Well, a few months passed by, and nothing really happened for me romantically after that. And with Valentine's Day coming up, then I knew I would be spending it alone. You have to be going out with someone for a certain period of time before making a date with them on the most romantic day of the year, right? What made things even worse is that my roommate was dating someone, and it was all I ever heard about. Don't get me wrong, I was happy that he had someone in his life, but you don't really like hearing about it all the time when you are by yourself. I really just wanted someone of my own, you know? Well, when the day came around, I spent the entire day home reading and watching some movies on my laptop. It was a truly depressing day. It only got worse when my roommate got home. Even though it was relatively late at night, I could tell that he wasn't alone, so he must have brought the new boyfriend over. Normally my roommate didn't do things like that too quickly, so I suppose that the night must have gone pretty well. I had no desire to hear what they were doing, though, as anyone with roommates could probably tell you, so I put on some headphones while I was watching the movies, and was just happy that I couldn't hear anything that was happening. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep on my bed while watching a movie, but something woke me up late in the night. Now my first thought was that it was because the movie I had been watching had stopped, and the sudden quietness through the headphones woke me up. But it took me only a quick glance at my computer to realize that my movie had ended hours ago, and it was really late in the night. I heard a clicking noise coming from the other side of the room, and although I didn't know what it was at first, I quickly recognized the sound. It was the sound of a door being latched shut very quietly. I felt a shock to my nervous system, thinking that someone had opened my door. The light from the laptop was the only light in the room. Since it was shining right in my face, it was hard to see the rest of the room, but the light was bright enough that I could make out that there was someone in my bedroom with me. There was a figure that was standing right inside of the door. I began to move my laptop, trying to get up and confront whoever this was. However, they moved really fast and grabbed something off of my desk. They immediately threw it at me, and it hit me in the head. I found out later that it was a paperweight, but I couldn't have known that at the time. The figure then came right to the bed and grabbed me around the throat. It wasn't doing the best job of choking me, though. I was able to cry out right when it first started, but then they moved their hands closer to my Adam's apple and pushed down on it really hard. I tried my best to pry them off of me, but laying in my bed, I was not in a good position to do this. I couldn't get any leverage. I still couldn't get a good look at the person, and I was doing my best to not be choked to death. But I couldn't do anything at all, and I had no idea why this was happening, and I couldn't pry the hands off of my neck. Then, the light to my room turned on. I noticed several things right away. First, my roommate must have heard me cry out and came into the room to turn my light on. Second, the person choking me was the guy that I had broken up with previously. I was puzzled as to how he had gotten into the apartment, but didn't have the ability to ponder on it as he was choking me to death. He turned his head quickly too, but didn't let go of my neck. My roommate came over and grabbed him, and after a bit of a struggle, pulled him off me. Fortunately, my roommate was much bigger and stronger and able to do this. He pushed the guy up against the wall of the room. I lay there, trying to recover from the pain, when my roommate began yelling at the guy to get the hell out. It took a few moments, but finally, my ex left the room, and I heard as he went out of the apartment. So here is what happened. My roommate had never met the guy that I was dating. So that guy wanted to get back at me for breaking up with him. He began dating my roommate. Apparently, before I'd moved in, my ex had looked at the apartment but chose not to rent it. I had told him where I lived, so he knew who my roommate was. He came over and they slept together on Valentine's Day, and he used that access to my apartment to try and get some revenge on me. Fortunately, my roommate called the police quickly, and I gave him his address. The guy was arrested for aggravated assault and battery. It is too bad that the Valentine's Day I remember the most was so horrible. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. As usual, I want to thank all my paid Patreon subscribers, starting with my two VIPs, Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Hopper 8. I also want to thank Heidi H, Chronic J, Stinky News, EricaOdd, Tracy Sellars, Kelli Clark, and Broken Angel. I hope everybody is having a great Valentine's Day. I didn't tell anyone I was doing this video because I wanted it to be a surprise, so I hope you're surprised. 2 videos in 3 days. I of course have a Valentine. My Valentine knows who they are, so happy Valentine's Day, baby. I love you very much. Also, to people who might not have heard in the last video, I am including a GoFundMe for a friend and a longtime subscriber, Joan Hoffman, whose niece needs some medical attention. That's going to be in the description, so even if you can't donate, if you can share it on social media, that would be really appreciated. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified of new videos. Leave me a comment, which I'll do my best to get back to, and share the video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you want narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address in the description. And now I'd like to mention all my free Patreon members: Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, Evil Black Cat, Lori Hicks, Lisa Herman, Krystal Robin, Hillbilly 13, RhettSchall, and John Tull. But most importantly, even on Valentine's Day, don't forget to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding and trying to steal your Valentine's candy. Good night.